I would like to welcome all of you to the first talk of the RCT Human Capital seminar series. So I need to say good morning to everyone and also good evening to Professor Joshua Hawley, who is in the United States and with 12-hour time difference. And since the seminar today will be taking place in English, there is also a live translation into Thai language available. So you may just click the interpretation button at the bottom of the Zoom and then switch into Thai language. This is possible. A bit of the background of this seminar series. So this is the joint seminar hosted by 3 institutions. First is the Equitable Education Fund, or the EEF. Second, the Research Institute for Policy Evaluation and Design. And third is the the Poi Pagon Institute for Economics Research. So in order to learn a bit of the idea behind this seminar series, may I first invite Ajahn Phumsalan or Ajahn Go to say a few words about the seminar series.
ครับสวัสดีครับทุกท่าน
Yes, good morning
everyone.
Good morning to everyone.
To Professor Joshua Hawley.
Good evening to Professor George.
I'm an interim director of the Equitable Education Research Institute at the Equitable Education Fund Thailand. So thank you very much for your kind offer and willingness to be our speaker for the first speaker on your Sunday night. I would like to say a few words about this seminar series. I think maybe may I speak in Thai so that maybe you can reach to Thai audience as well. ครับ I hope you understand. You still understand Thai pretty well. ครับผมครับก็ขอสวัสดีท่านผู้ร่วม
Yes. Good morning, and to all dear participants. I would like to say a little bit more about the background of this seminars series. So this seminar is a work that the EEF together with the RIPET or the Institute for the Research from the University of Chamber of Commerce and also the PEER or the Poi Pagon Institute for Economics Research, that we would like to do it in a seminar series about the research that use evidence-based about the human resources or about the education or something related to this. One of the activities that we had done before this, there are many things like for training, RCT that we did together with the JPAL Swiss Asia, and we had done activities about training in a series. Many of you here were part of the training then, and after the JPAL activities from that time, we had planned to do the continuous activities. For example, together with the RIPET and PEER. So we did the training of about RCT, another set in this year. So please be with us. And the other one for the RCT, we have, if the COVID is a kind of relaxed, we hope that we can have the training on site. And then we still have the research, like the real RCT research, and together with researchers in many domestically and internationally. And one of the importance of this seminar, we want to disseminate the knowledge or understandings about evidence-based research. It may be RCT or the other methodology, especially in human capital, to our Thai society and also the Thai researchers or the allies of us or the network to have the same understanding and to create a network when we do research to disseminate the knowledge about the research that use the evidence base, and this is for the education and also the human resources environment in Thailand. So I hope that all the participants today, you will monitor our work in the future, and you probably will hear from us, whether from the Facebook or the email or the mailing list. So please keep engaged. And so I would like to declare a formally opening of the seminar.
Okay, thank you very much ครับอาจารย์ก็ so and it is a really great pleasure to have a Professor George Hawley to be our first speaker today. He's going to present under the topics of the labor force impacts of the enhanced employment counseling in the United States, the limits of an encouragement RCT design. But before I give the floor to George, may I have maybe 1 or 2 minutes to give an introduction to our speaker today. So Dr. Joshua Hawley is the professor at the John Glenn College of Public Affairs at the Ohio State University. He also serves as the director of the Ohio Education Research Center and also associate director of the Center for Human Resource Research. Dr. Hawley is a Fulbright scholar at Thailand Development Research Institute, or TDI, and also at the Chiang Mai University Faculty of Social Science for the year 2021 and 2022. Dr. Hawley received his doctorate and master's degree from the Harvard University in International Education Policy, and his master's and bachelor's in Asian Studies, History, and Anthropology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He was once an exchange student at the Chiang Mai University in Thailand in the year 1988 to the year 1989. So that's why he can listen to Thai language like pretty well. I'm not sure if he might give the presentation in Thai as well today. No. Okay. Regarding Dr. Hawley's research, he's broadly interested in the area of applied economics in education with a focus on adult human resource and vocational programs. He has conducted studies of vocational education in Thailand, South Korea, Russia, and many other countries in Africa and Central Europe. He has published a range of education, economics, policy, and engineering journals. And in the year 2020, he published 2 books, Data Science in Public Interest, and the other one, the 2020 Handbook of Adults and Continuing Education. And he also mentioned in his bio that he lives in Columbus, Ohio, and very much looks forward to getting back to work in Thailand after many years. Okay, so may I tell you a bit about the format of the presentation today? So I think I will let George presenting the paper for maybe around half an hour to 45 minutes, and then that will be followed by the Q&A session. So without any further delay, the floor is yours, George.
สวัสดีครับทุกท่านขอบคุณมากครับที่มีโอกาสได้
Good morning everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present about the RCT education.
I'd love to do this in Thai, but it's not going to happen. Are you going to show the slides, Nuat, or am I? I think you have the slides, right?
Let me ask, Kun Phai, will you be sharing the slide or let Ajahn George share it? I think it might be better from your side.
Okay, I can try.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes,ครับ.
Okay. All right. So you might see some I tried to look up some specialized words in Thai, and you might see some of the words there, but you can just ignore that. So before I get started, I just want to say thank you. I don't know if my two colleagues are on, Dr. Liu and Dr. Mun. Both are at Ohio State and were involved very much in this project. Dr. Liu is a labor economist and Dr. Mun is a education scholar. And they contributed immensely to this project. The other person was Dr. Randy Olson, who's an econometrician and close colleague here at Ohio State. And Dr. Olson has retired at this point, but still helps out with some of the econometric work occasionally. So the work I do at Ohio State is very data intensive, and I operate two research centers, one of which is the Ohio Ed Research Center, which does policy research with state and local government. And the other is the Center for Human Resource Research, which does a lot of data science work. Among other things, we administer the national longitudinal surveys for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And then my work is primarily in administrative data with the state of Ohio. And the reason I mention this is to get to kind of the punchline. The RCT we have here failed for some fairly interesting reasons in terms of the design. But because we have a great deal of administrative data from the Ohio government, that it's possible to still continue this research with and supplement RCTs that exist. So I think that's the kind of point I want you to leave the meeting with at the end, is that not to give up hope if something doesn't work out, but also to build in safeguards for the projects using administrative records. So I'm going to talk a little bit about career counseling as a system, the research approach, some summary outcomes, the reason it failed a little bit, some group differences, and then administrative data. And then I'd be happy to take questions. So the main thing that motivates workforce development in government is to help individuals kind of become more successful in jobs or job hunting or technical training. And it's kind of a complicated type of government programs. And normally when we say workforce development in the United States, we're talking about services that are for adults or for youth. And in the case of, for example, in the case of in-school youth, they might get some after-school tutoring or a subsidized job or some online career counseling. So for the most part, those services are separated based on the background and the needs of the individuals. Of course, out-of-school youth, people who have dropped out of high school, or they may receive what's called a GED, which is people are quite familiar with in Thailand. They might get some job training. They might do more active work with a counselor, and it might happen year round. And so career counseling is embedded in these services in a somewhat secondary way in most of the federal or state policies. And that's something that we were addressing in the CCMEP project. So just as a way of background for people to understand, the United States policies around workforce development for youth, there are principally two sets of big policies. One, operated by the Department of Labor, is called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. And it has a category of programs for youth called the Young Adult Programs. And it's designed to address specific barriers to employment. So, for example, if you're homeless, that's a barrier, or if you lack a high school degree, that's a barrier. And that program has been around for a number of decades in different forms, but not the same. So it's not the same in some of these. So the second program is TANF, the Temporary Assistance for Needing Families, and this is operated by HHS, and it tends to be associated with cash assistance. So this is the program that you classically will hear stereotyped as welfare. And the welfare programs, or TANF, have both a cash component as well as having a kind of employment support component. And those employment supports are then kind of include services for people who are over age 18. And then in Ohio, what's really interesting is that they expanded to individuals who were at age 14 or below or above. So we have these two kind of pillars of programs. They're very different. But in Ohio in 2016, the state government decided to enact a new law that combined those programs. And so this was a really interesting idea, and the people in the governor's office and the legislature who were in charge of writing this legislation are people that I know well, and they were trying to develop a set of services for youth that combined the best of the WIOA programs, the Department of Labor programs, and the welfare programs. And they built these services so that they would be much more integrated. So the basic idea of we abbreviate as CCMEP is to use case management, career counseling, and other services as kind of like the foundation of somebody's workforce development activities. And so these services kind of provide employment training, they provide supportive services, they may even provide mental health counseling, housing supports. The idea is really to not only address the economic barriers to success, but also to address the social, emotional, kind of individual barriers. And so when I heard about this policy, I had been working with the governor's office for 10 years. And I said, I want to evaluate this because it's a great example at a state level. Ohio is a very large state. And so it was a great example at a state level of a innovation that the state government was pushing that allowed people in the agencies to work together. And so what we were seeing, this is kind of an effect potentially of collaborative services delivery. as well as an effect of working on many specific occupational or skills training programs. So, and I have a link here to the legislation just in case you're interested. So CCMEP is fundamentally different, as I've said before. It's a comprehensive approach. You get training, you can receive a GED, you receive some maybe alternative basic skills or adult education, subsidized employment potentially, and occupational training. And just as an interesting anecdote, we evaluated, another evaluation we did was incentive payments. So we didn't, I'm not going to talk about that in this presentation, but if you're interested at a later time, Randy Olson, myself, and Tian Liu, we did a parallel study looking at incentive payments for employment outcomes. That was quite interesting, but it's the same fundamental program. This is kind of a cut and paste from something Sunny pulled together a long time ago, and it shows really the CCMEP process. And the process, as it stands here, is separated into 3 steps: pre-enrollment, enrollment, and follow-up. And during the pre-enrollment part, individuals are screened, they receive comprehensive assessment, they identify employment and education goals. I just want to emphasize that this is very unusual. Most employment training programs start and stop with eligibility. Are you eligible? Yes, go forward. Are you not eligible? Go back. And so if a government says very intentionally, we want to do screening, we want to understand people's basic skills, we want to understand people's kind of academic achievement, their personal goals, I think that's a very positive approach to government action in the workforce sector, because so often we treat people as if they're just deficits. So we treat people as if they are failing, and we need to fill them up with something. But the reality is humans are very complicated. And so every 14-year-old, every 15-year-old, every 16-year-old is different. And so government public policies need to incorporate that difference in their individual planning. So after all this pre-enrollment happens, we enroll people, and then they are supposed to access one of 14 different services. There's a lot of services, everything from mental health to housing to job training to a GED to, it just goes on and on and on. And all of those services were not completely in place in 2016 when we started the negotiations to do this evaluation. It took, I'm not even sure every county has them at this point still. But when they are in the programs, the length of that program experience is somewhat indeterminate, because TANF has a, kind of a time limit of a certain number of years. WIOA has a certain amount of money that you can spend as an individual. It's kind of like a grant. So individuals will go through the program. Somebody will go through for 3 months, somebody will go through for 6 months, some people will go for 4 years. So it's kind of hard to figure out how to do this evaluation. And then all along, they're supposed to be working with a case manager and working with that. So just to make this very clear, in 2015, before this program operated, if you were between the ages of 16 and 24, you were eligible for either some WIOA activities or some TANF activities, but not both. And so everything was very separated. So you had a GED over here, you got some training over here, you got some career training over here. You had no supports. And if you go forward 1 year, they're giving younger people access to training. They're doing pre-enrollment, enrollment, follow-up, testing, career counseling. There's a lot of differences in terms of the individual experience that's supposed to happen. And one of the studies we did was, and Sunny primarily oversaw this, was an implementation study. And so for 3 years, basically, we followed implementation of these policies at the county level and the institution level. And that's what's necessary really to do a good job with an RCT, is to really understand the implementation, particularly when it's a very new project. So these are existing federal policies that have quite a lot of resources attached to them, but the specific way they're being enacted and followed in Ohio in 2016, 17, 18, 19, very different from what the planning was. It's not at all easy. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time on that, because I want you to both understand that this is different from what happened before, but it's also a new opportunity that has great potential benefit for a lot of governments in how you approach this project. So just eligibility here, if you wanted to read this on your own, we had a big problem with eligibility for CCMEP, because CCMEP mandated eligibility for all youth of a certain age with certain barriers. And you can read the law here. So everybody who's over 14 and not more than 24 are required. So that bolded statement there, are required. That meant that we could not do a traditional evaluation, an RCT, with that group, because government insisted that every individual, if they presented to the county, every individual had to be allowed entrance. They did not want us to delay services. They did not want us to meter services. They did not. So it took a long time of negotiating to figure out what they would allow. There were another group of individuals we could randomize, people who volunteer for the program. So the problem with volunteers in this context is that the state would not guarantee that they would pay for volunteers. So we could randomize them, and we did in some cases. We had a number of counties that chose to randomize volunteers, but the participation was not guaranteed, and we, as the researchers, might have had to pay for their training costs. So it was very risky for our services. So from an economics design standpoint, we had real restrictions when it comes to the research design because of eligibility. And specifically, if you want to do a classic RCT at a state level, so we wanted to operate at the entire state level. We didn't just want to pick one program and evaluate in that program. We wanted enough cases that we could generalize to the entire state. And so we ended up working with two different evaluation designs. One, a traditional randomization that allowed volunteers at the county level who were eligible but were not required to participate. And then we did what was kind of a unique feature of this project, is we randomized based on an encouragement design. Now, an encouragement design, if you're familiar with it, is an alternative RCT measure that takes advantage of the fact that lots of people can be asked to participate in certain programs. And in this case, we had a lot of people who were eligible for the services but had not enrolled. And so what we did was we randomized kind of messages and contacts from the county to those individuals to try to get them to enroll. So if you think about this, if you have 100 people who previously had not responded and were eligible, we took 50 of those people and we put them we texted them, and 50 of the people we put in the control group. And so we had a fairly good design. Now, this encouragement design is something that's been used in studies in the United States when it comes to kind of filing taxes and using FAFSA forms, which is the eligibility for federal financial aid. So it's a mechanism that is used in the randomization literature when typically you just need a small push over the finish line, and there's a very large benefit that might accrue. So that's kind of a critical problem that we learned about later on. It might feel like we as researchers think that people going through an employment training program are going to get a huge benefit. But the reality is they're not going to get a huge benefit because most people are poor. They have low employment involvement. They're going to get low earnings during and after. They don't have a lot of human capital. So the treatment is not powerful enough in and of itself, even if they go through and they receive the CCMEP treatment. You know, I think it's a fabulous program. I think it's a great program. I think it's well designed. I think it's well intentioned. I think the money is well spent. I think the problem is that it's still not enough to help individuals overcome a legacy of poverty, to overcome 8, 10, 12 years of poor educational involvement. So at the end of the day, we had two designs: a traditional randomization, which you would understand completely based on the people who were eligible but not required according to the law, and an encouragement design where people were eligible and were enrolled, randomized into treatment and control, and then they received an encouragement. And you have a picture on the right here of one of the encouragements that Sunny developed. And it's basically just a, hey, if you want to earn a GED and you can make up to $5,000 more a year, and if you want to register for this class, call here or click here or respond to this text. And so there are a lot of benefits to using text messaging. So kind of like using Facebook for communicating with research respondents, it's very cheap to do, so it's very cost effective. But at the same time, many of the phone numbers did not belong to the people. They belonged to their parents. They belonged to their grandparents. Many of the phone numbers were from phones that were not working. So the phones themselves did not work. So a traditional randomization is great. You flip a coin, you go into one pool or another. An encouragement randomization takes a pool of people and gives them a nudge and says, hey, why don't you participate in this program? You're going to make a lot more money. And unless the program has a kind of benefit that's commensurate with the effort. So like, if I'm going to spend 6 months in a training program, I want to know that I'm going to make good money at the end of it. So micro credentials, registered apprenticeships, Job Corps. These are all programs in the United States context that will increase human capital enough that the people are going to enroll and be successful. So, okay, so we had two waves of text messages to the encouragement design between 2018 and 2019. And, you know, you'll see basically the way we did this was we batched the messages for a couple of quarters. Then we did a follow-up for a single quarter in 2019. And then we followed up on the people for at least a year. We had 6 counties that participated, and this is a picture of Ohio. I'm here in the middle of the state in Franklin County. Cuyahoga is Cleveland, and that's right up in the north east part of the state. Lucas County is Toledo. These are all big cities in Ohio, so they have a lot of cases potentially. And the rest of them are much smaller: Portage, Stark, Crawford. Those are much smaller counties. Now, every county has a CCMEP program. Some counties share programs because the population is small, but every county could participate in this, and we recruited 6 counties that had big enough populations that they would allow us to randomize either the traditional randomization or the kind of encouragement. There were these kind of key outcome measures, and this is an important. I'm just going to leave these up. I'm not going to repeat them. There's basically 3 kinds of outcome measures that we deal with in the United States. We deal with either credentials, we deal with employment, or we deal with wages. And those are basically the core components of something called the common measures. And the common measures are the federal government's common instrument for calculating whether or not an employment and training program is going well. So we had some summary results here. This represents kind of 13,000 individuals who were by age, gender, marital status, pregnancy, parental status, kind of the comparison between the treated and untreated for the encouragement design. And so as you'll see, you know, the age distribution is kind of interesting. The majority of people are kind of in that middle bracket there, 19 to 22, 16 to 18. You have a few people who are enrolling when they're 14 and 15, and then a couple, you know, when you go over age 20, 22, 23, 24. And the reasons, some of the reasons why the ages work out the way they are is early on in the program design, 14-year-olds were not eligible for the program, so there's less of them in the circulation at this point. There's an awful lot of people who are either single parents or pregnant. So the kind of the gender distribution kind of makes sense given the biases of the eligibility for TANF or other welfare programs. But you know, this is kind of an interesting thing here. If you look at earnings 1 year before they randomized. So this is again inclusive of everybody who's 14, they're not eligible to work, right? I mean, we have their work data in our system, but this is basically reflective of the non-zero records for people who are eligible to work. They received an average of only $814 a quarter. So a quarter is, you know, that's very low. So the reality is this is kind of reflective of the labor market experience of young people in the United States. These are not full-time workers, so people are supposed to be in school 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. They're not supposed to be working full-time. So it skews this distribution low because it's inclusive of those individuals. People also kind of worked, you can see that people worked very few weeks within a quarter, 1 year before the randomization. So that makes you understand why this is so low, just because the work experience was quite low. So the largest county, this is just one of the counties here, Cuyahoga. So we had the total enrollment was about 13,000. Of that 13,000, most were from Cleveland, which is not that surprising if you know Ohio. It's a big city. It's kind of like, it's not like Bangkok in Thailand, but it's a large metropolitan area. And so in that case, we had 5,800 in the text message, 5,700 no text message, and we had a enrollment rate that was roughly equivalent among the two populations. Now you can see the problem here. if you're following the basic math, that you should not have this happen. If you are doing your RCT correctly, you should not have the control group enroll in the program. But in our case, about the same number of people enrolled from the control group as from the treatment group. So we use this encouragement design. We ask people, hey, would you like to come back and learn about this program? About 4% of people from both, it's 3.7, 4.2, it's similar, enrolled. And we thought that there were a lot of valid explanations for this, but fundamentally from an econometric perspective, it showed the failure. And, I don't think of failure as a bad thing. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, and this was an RCT that evaluated a brand new program at scale. So this was not, we were not looking at a pilot program. We were not looking at one test case. We're looking at the whole state. So, it's not surprising to me that a lot of what we learned here is about the weaknesses of the evaluation design. So I think failure is a positive. It teaches us that measuring economic outcomes is very hard, and it should be hard. Otherwise, people would have gotten this right 50 years ago. But I want to touch on 4 kind of things that I think are important for us to remember as researchers. Technical design problems, RCT design issues, data science problems, and then some just general suggestions. In the technical side, the CCMEP legislation was very forward-facing, and there were some technical issues. Government gave the counties a 6-month grace period for implementation. So there was really there was a lot of resistance, what we call policy resistance at the county and institution level. Implementation varied a great deal. Sunny did a lot of surveys and focus groups with county workforce managers, and we learned a lot about how they improved over time, but at the beginning they were very resistant. Fundamentally, combining social services is a massive shift in social policy. So if you're a principal in a school, asking schools to provide school lunches is fine. So school feeding programs are very routine these days. But if you then ask that school to also provide mental health counseling. You ask them to provide pregnancy supports. You ask them to provide after school employment counseling. So you layer on all these other services, it's very difficult for government to catch up. And so what seems really good as a design principle from a legislature is very difficult when it comes to action. So I fully admit that a traditional RCT design would have been a better method for all of the cases. But we have to acknowledge that government gets to decide who enrolls in these programs. We as researchers do not decide what eligibility is. And so I spent a lot of time and energy trying to convince managers in the governor's office that they should allow a randomization because it would be better for them in the long run. They would understand the effect of the programs, but I was unable to convince them. And I came up with the encouragement as a second thing. I didn't want to do it, but I had to. The encouragement evaluation probably will work very well if the benefit is large. So if the projected benefit of the program is very, very high, so like if you're going to randomize people's participation in, university, right? And they're going to make a lot more money if they complete university. Definitely, if you need, you can use an encouragement. It's a great idea because the benefit will be very high. But if the benefit is relatively low, like, a small social benefit every month from the government, maybe $10 or 1,000 baht or something, it's probably going to be very difficult. We did this separate evaluation that shows this to me a little bit with a pay for performance model. So if people enrolled, they met certain goals, their participation was much better and the outcomes were much better. So I think combining an encouragement design with pay for performance would have been great. We could have done that. It probably would have worked out really well. Data science issues, client software was being upgraded at the time we were going through this. So this was the real problem with the enrollment of people who were in the control group. The people who were in the control group were enrolled in the treatment because of errors at the county level with software implementation. And so even though we had set up the randomization procedures, counties were administering it. And we were not in charge of the administration of the randomization. So we had to deal with this. And OSU maintains a lot of data. So this OLDA that I manage, we had a lot of good data, but non-participant data was a problem. So we had a lot of information on people who were in the programs, not so much information on people who didn't end up enrolling, people in the control group. So last thing, don't be impatient. And wait for a regular RCT. I think I pushed too hard on a new government program because I really was impatient. I wanted to get this done. I thought it was really important for the state to understand and be out front. And then the last thing is just data. We always have good data in the background. Don't wait to think about data at the end. Think about data up front and the data systems you have available. The last thing, we're lucky that our team planned a second study, quasi-experimental design, and we did a lot of treatment and control samples with matching algorithms. So we were able to show kind of differences for for participants and non-participants on average quarterly earnings by gender. So when it comes to, you know, this is kind of the message that I give to you, is that even if the RCT doesn't work the way you want, that you can still learn really important things because you have a good administrative data system in place. And so I know that Thailand has social benefits data. I know you have education data. Bringing those data together in the state of Ohio is what allows me to do all these studies. So some of the, you know, the differences, I know you wanted me to stop at 40 minutes, so I'm going to try to complete here. Some of the group differences are only able to do because we have this very strong administrative data system in the state of Ohio. And so this has been a 20-year project. I mean, I've been doing this project for 20 years. So I built a technical kind of system. I built kind of systems that used federal dollars to store the data. And then since about 2012, we've been able to have the data in place so that we can do these state-specific evaluations in Ohio. Our data holdings are quite substantial. This is I think the last point really. We have higher education data in many different forms. We have education data, which is K through 12. We have workforce data, which includes all of these other labor kind of employment files, uninsurance, and then WIOA, which is the job training program. And then we have disability data and housing finance data. And so there's a lot of information that we maintain that allows us to do very different things than other research teams can do. So just to conclude here, I mean, I think what I've covered today is employment counseling to me is a really critical tool for workforce development. RCTs have limitations, but are critical. To do evidence-based policy well requires increased utilization of administrative data. So I just kind of want to end with those 4 summary points. I think I'm done. 40 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much, George, for the interesting presentation, like pointing out the issues and also suggestions over the RCT encouragement design. Okay. Now, shall we proceed to the Q&A session? Yeah, I think we have like some of us like raising their hands, ready to ask questions. Yeah, Ajahnครับ.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Joshua Hawley. So actually I have 2, point and questions, I guess. And then first one is, I think it's very interesting to see your presentation, and especially it's just, I mean, one thing that is really true, and it's really, I think it's good that we see it again, and because it's a reality, it's a governmental restrictions on doing this. I think it's a big part of thing that we see, that the governmental restrictions are real. I mean, some we can avoid, some we cannot, and then I think that's why I make RCT or even make anything that is it's a field work difficult, but it's part of life that we need to learn and we need to deal with it. I think that's what we can see from here very clearly and very nice. And it's costly evaluation itself, right? It's very costly for you. So therefore, my question would be, well, maybe your advice, if we have to do something similar, maybe not exactly the same policy, but similar, and the government are like similar, and they're likely to be, I mean, they're likely to put a lot of restrictions there. What would you suggest? You might have said already in a slide, but since I think I want to hear it again, is should we do RCT at all, or maybe we wait, or maybe do something else? That would be my first question. My second question is about you showed a graph about your quasi-experimental analysis. You didn't have time to say much. I want to go back to that a little bit. I think if I read the graph correctly, so at the end of the day, the outcome are not great, right? I mean, we don't see a big difference. The question is, I mean, since you do also the implementation research, is it because of the design of the policy itself that you think doesn't work, or it's because it's too early? So, I mean, the first phase of doing anything, it's not the design is bad, but because you implement it poorly. So that's my two questions.
Thank you, T, for your questions. Excuse me. I think RCTs have their place. I think if it's a very high stakes policy with many billions of dollars are bought in place, doing an RCT makes sense and is fiscally responsible. I think the trick is if you have an existing social policy that is relatively well defined, that's probably a better case for an RCT. So, if you randomly assign people to kind of learn online, it might be harder than if you assign somebody to get a certain scholarship to support, tutoring or increased job training skills, something smaller. I think I had, I don't know, there's this English language expression, I bit off more than I could chew. I don't know if you're familiar with this expression, but it means that you basically, you think you can eat the entire, burger or whatever it is, but really you can only eat a quarter of it. And so a lot of times as social scientists, I think we want to do really important, good work, but we try to do too much at once. And so I know Sunny's on the call, and she's probably laughing because the reality is that I tend to do that quite often. I tend to bite off more than I can chew. But I think my recommendation is, if the Thai government wishes to evaluate employment and training for youth, trying to figure out smaller nudges that you can evaluate that are RCTs are probably a better effort. So like speeding up application procedures as a way for increasing enrollment. Text messages are a great way to get people to enroll. Most people are not going to go into a job training center to enroll physically anymore. So people want to be, that's something you can randomize pretty easily, and something that might have a better effect on enrollment itself. That job training outcomes, and this gets at your quasi-experimental question. In the United States, we have an established literature in economics that shows that there's basically, for adults who have been employed, so older men like myself, who lose our jobs, we will get more out of job training than younger people or women who don't have a lot of labor market experience. Because it seems to be what's happening is the labor market is rewarding experience rather than training. And so if you're a young person and you have no experience and you go through a job training program, it's not sufficient to make up for your lack of experience. And so I think that we have lots of reports we've produced for the state of Ohio that show this difference, like CCMEP, community college programs, vocational training, fairly low levels of outcome for earnings for young people, much better outcomes for experienced adults. And so that fits with the RCT data from MDRC and from other very established research groups. So I'm optimistic. I think it's a good policy. I think it was we were a little new, and we probably should have waited and evaluated a small part, but what's done is done. So.
Okay, I think now we have more questions from คุณสมรัตน์ครับ
Hi, good morning. You guys see me?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, thanks very much, Josh, for a very interesting presentation. I've been having the similar experience, I think, on the failing of the encouragement design. I have two questions actually. So first is perhaps questioning on your encouragement design instrument. Is it possible that one reason why it failed it's because it's a randomization of information dissemination, which could have spillover effect if you randomize in a very small localized area? So that's one question. The second question, you mentioned the use of admin data, which I totally agree in doing impact evaluation, but doing a quasi experiment on admin data is not always easy. When you have to find the ways to identify, control and treatment group and so on. So my question on that is there a way to combine admin data and RCT to make the best of both? So for sure, doing RCT, when you have to collect data, you can't collect at a very wide coverage because it's too costly. You have admin data, which basically cover all people. But again, admin data, you don't have, variable that can identify exactly the exposure to the program. So how would you suggest combining the two to make the best of this? Thank you.
Well, you make a really interesting econometric point about small areas and randomization using information and whether there's kind of a contamination of the enrollment. And I confess that that's possible. I mean, I think we were randomizing at a county level. So in Ohio, counties are pretty big. So and the counties that participated heavily, like Toledo and Cleveland, are fairly large. So I think the likelihood is that if we did a geocoding of the addresses, we would probably learn that there's some clustering, and that would help us understand whether there was in fact a contamination. But Tien, who's kind of lead labor market economist on this, I see her on the call, and she may want to send something in the chat. I don't know. But the second question is about the quasi experiment and the administrative data, and I fully agree. I don't, to be honest, this entire evaluation cost us $700,000, which in the United States is not very much for an RCT. And we spent most of the money on staff time to evaluate the data, not on data collection. We have very robust data resources because of the many data sets we've acquired from the state in the past. So I guess the point is that administrative data is really the only way to do RCTs in a cost-effective and sustainable manner. And so spending the hard work that, I've spent 20 years working with the state of Ohio to build their administrative data systems. That makes more sense to me than doing smaller RCTs, because I think it pays more dividend in the long run. Now, I may be wrong, but that's been my choice.
Okay, Yeah, I think we still have time for more questions. So in case you have questions, you may just use the reactions button at the bottom of Zoom and then just click raise your hands. But if you're not comfortable with this, okay, you may just open your mic and then ask the questions. And also, in case you would like to ask question in Thai language, this is possible as well, and there will be the live translation in this channel too. So now let me hear question from Kunada.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting to learn all the experience because like most of like published papers we read on the RCT, they would talk about the successful one. So this is a very good lesson for us. So I just have two questions. So one was like continuing from what you talk about the data system, like you show us about the like factor including earnings for the like control and treatment group. So I just wonder how you collect those data. Were they from like your data system that you already have it? And the second question is more like like policy related. So you said that the benefit of this like wonderful program is quite sort of small because it's hard to overcome 8 to 10 years of poor education that already happened for children who are like for the youth who are like 14 to 24. I just wonder whether the state was doing anything for the children younger than 14 years old. Thank you.
Yeah. So we have all of those data from the administrative data system. So there were some data elements we needed to get from the counties that was special. But for the most part, we had legal agreements to receive downloads of the data on a monthly or quarterly basis from the state. So we didn't need a lot of additional data. So we needed to know who the control and who the treated were and some background characteristics, but not much else. And so, like I said, most of our money could be then spent on analysis and not on data collection, which is, we didn't have to design a survey for individuals. We didn't have to, collect survey data on individuals on a monthly, quarterly, yearly basis. We did that for the performance part of the study, but not for the main randomization. And I'm very grateful that we didn't have to do that. And then the state of Ohio has a lot of public policies for students who are younger than 14. We have early childhood policies that are involved basically allocating people to better performing programs. There's subsidies for parents who are poor who need to send their kids to childcare. There's lots of programs that exist. But when it comes to career development, which is really what this is about, it's very difficult in the United States, and I know in Thailand too, to tell parents that their child may not be eligible for university or may not be, they may need to go to vocational education. So those are family decisions. And so for government to be involved in decisions for families is very challenging. It's necessary. And most of those conversations happen at the teacher level. So a good teacher in 8th grade should be paying attention to students' aptitude, their career goals, their parents' interests, but most teachers don't have the training. So I think the state of Ohio does a pretty good job with career counseling in high school. It has some of the problems are in middle school. And so that's where they need to do more. And they're trying now with apprenticeships and career counseling and things. So those are ideas that I think are worth continuing.
Thank you. And next is คุณรังสรรค์ครับ
ขอบคุณครับ สวัสดีครับอาจารย์
สวัสดีครับ
Thank you very much ค่ะ Thank you ค่ะอาจารย์
Thank you, RIPET, for organizing this very useful forum. I kind of unintended case, no, because I learned from Ajahn that you having this conversation, so I take the liberty to listen. Because the youth employability is also an interest of UNICEF. No, I think many of you are aware of. No, I have two follow-up questions from Ajahn Nada. No, so it just we think alike on the career counseling. I know that perhaps this type of engagement with the government, it doesn't really need to wait until the outcome from the research or the research to produce the recommendation. Would you share a little bit in terms of how we actually kind of create a demand or generate this conversation with the system, so at least they can embrace, because it's quite impressive how you actually have been working on the longitudinal data establishment in Ohio. That's the first one. And the second one, I kind of waiting you elaborate a little bit more on the measurable skill something there, because as I mentioned before, UNICEF is interested on youth employability. So I just want you to a bit, elaborate on that one.
Yeah, no, those are good questions. On the measurable skills, the measurement, there are technical definitions of measurable skills in the legislation that allow the federal government to capture whether or not somebody has like improved literacy, numeracy skills. And I think that those definitions are not particularly good at measuring increases in cognitive or technical competencies. The way we normally do it is by credential attainment. So whether someone has, it's an outcome measure, right? So it makes a lot more sense. You can see it in the data, you can compare it across others. If there's a test score, you can norm it and, look at changes in individuals. If you've got items, you can look at compare tests. It's very good. So I think I would be less, I think it's ideal to measure competencies, but it's much harder. And so we tend to default to using credentials. And then, Rung-san, I've forgotten your first question. I apologize.
It was about the conversation with the system. Yes. In terms of establishment of the career counseling. Yes.
Yeah, and it's a much more interesting question. And I would say that you know me, and so a lot of the work I've done in past has involved how data is used by different consumers or teachers or principals or I'm not an economist classically, so I have not spent my career designing econometric models. I've spent most of my career trying to figure out how I can get more data into the hands of people who take action. So the two good examples are teachers. So we give a lot of data historically to teachers through kind of projects with the Ohio Department of Education, because teachers are very important to kids and to society. And then we also spend a lot of time giving data to policymakers. And just like in Thailand, we worry that people in the legislature or parliament have enough knowledge to make good decisions. And so we work closely with, in this case, the governor and the state legislature to make sure that they make good decisions, but we also work with counties, with local government. And so at some points in this project, Sunny particularly, and she's on, made presentations to a lot of counties about the data we were collecting, the data we needed, the effects, the importance of doing the randomization. And so trying to build rapport with communities is, I think, a critical part of research, if that helps.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for George? อาจารย์ศรีอาจารย์นันทา do you have any further issues to discuss?
No, I mean, I have no more question. I think we would hope to meet Professor Hawley in person soon. Hopefully he can come into Thailand, and hopefully we still have Test and Go for you to come in easily. So, no, I mean, I just want to say thank you again, and hope to see you in person soon. Thank you.
No. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. If I could ask a question of the group, I mean, what are the randomizations that you're designing that lead you to want to do this? I know a little bit about the early childhood evaluation that you're doing, but are there other RCTs that you're working on as a group, or?
Yeah, I mean, there is one project that related to this one particularly. Yeah. Actually EEF, where Phumsran is trying to, partly started from the COVID problem.
Right.
2 years ago, COVID has been, it's a problem, but it's not really, we are pretty close, right? The country is close, and we have some problem in some provinces. And one particular province that has been hit quite, severely is Samut Sakhon. It's not far from Bangkok, but it's huge.
Right.
The problem is huge there, and the student cannot go to school almost a year. And then, so, EEF and UNICEF actually started, by trying to, how they're going to help these kids. They work with the provincial official, and they work with the Starfish Foundation to start to do the teacher training. Hopefully to improve the education quality, and then create a better learning tools, and so to help recover. To help the kids with the learning recovery. Mm-hmm. So the design is we want to evaluate this intervention.
Okay.
So it's a very traditional design in many sense. So luckily we have some, but not much governmental restrictions. So since the resources has been limited anyway, so we wouldn't be able to treat all the school in the province. So we would be able to randomize schools. We have the school randomization. Who's going to be the treatment? Who's going to be control? So yeah, that's a basic idea.
That's good.
We haven't started thing yet. I think part of it, we thought we would start at January, and then COVID has been a big problem again. And then, well, luckily for me as a researcher, so we have time to design the test and everything. So maybe we'll start the full scale in May. You may be able to come and see by then.
Sure.
I don't know if Phumsran and Nada would like to add something.
Yes, and this project involves a lot with the UNICEF people as well. Ajahn Rang San also instrumental in supporting the learning loss recovery using this kind of RCT or some research. So I hope that if you can come around that time, then maybe you can come to work or have some guidance for us.
Oh, yeah, just to learn what you're doing would be fun. So. Well, I very much appreciate the opportunity and ขอบคุณมากนะครับที่ทุกท่านที่ได้มาฟังสัมมนาของ
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in this seminar, and good luck. Good luck. And then later on, we will have an opportunity to see face to face. Okay. All right.
Yes, and okay. I think on behalf of the organizer, I'd like to thank you, George, again. Okay, for coming as the first speaker of the RCT Human Capital Seminar series, and yeah, we really hope that it will keep going forward, and really look forward to seeing you in person as well. Okay, this coming May. And also, I would like to thank you, all the audience, for participating in this event, and we will keep you updated for the more talks to come under this seminar series. So I would like to say goodbye for today, and also say good night to George.
Thank you all very much.
Sawasdee krab.
Thank you.
Thank you.